Well, for more on what to expect from this year's UN General Assembly meeting, I want to bring in Klaus Larres. He's a distinguished professor of history and international affairs at the University of North Carolina at Chapel Hill. Professor, thanks so much for joining us. First, I want to pick up there from what we heard from Achim Steiner. COVID-19 is really exacerbating the global socio-economic divide, even in a post-COVID world, if we can talk about that sort of world. How do you chip away at this obvious setback?
Yeah, I think the General Assembly is particularly important this year because there are some urgent crises which need to be dealt with. There is a vaccine crisis still, the distribution crisis of the vaccine. There is still climate change, of course, an ever-increasing problem. And there are various political crises, not least the crisis President Biden has been involved in, the exit from Afghanistan, and of course the AUKUS deal. So all that will be discussed at the General Assembly. And the situation at the moment, the world situation at the moment, is precarious. So it's good that this meeting is actually taking place. It was only virtual last year, but now over 100 leaders have actually assembled in person, and hopefully that will lead to some results.
How much of a difference do you think this assembly in person makes compared to sort of a virtual gathering? What is the potential impact?
I think the formal speeches will be very similar like last year. It doesn't really matter whether you give a virtual speech formally in person or by video link. But after the speech and before the speech, people meet each other in the corridors. They have informal meetings. They go and have perhaps a drink with each other or a meal and a coffee. And I think that makes all the difference. And I think that is really appreciated by the leaders who often only see each other once a year at the General Assembly in New York. So that can make a difference.
You described the world as being in a precarious situation. The UN is no stranger to global challenges. How do COVID-19 and climate change present unique obstacles for the UN General Assembly?
Yeah, even in the United States, the COVID crisis has not been overcome. There are vaccines widely available in the United States, but there's a lot of resistance to being vaccinated. And as far as other countries are concerned, particularly the developing world, there simply are not enough vaccines available, even if people want to get vaccinated. And the huge majority of people does want to get vaccinated. There are not enough vaccines available. 70% of all the almost 6 billion vaccine shots available have only gone to 10 countries in the world. And that is, of course, a very sad situation. And Africa, I believe, has only received 2% of all available vaccine shots. So Africa actually makes up 70% of the world population. This is an imbalance which urgently needs to be rectified, because we all know as long as there is not herd immunity by vaccination, it will be very difficult to defeat the pandemic and the COVID crisis.
Yeah, really some remarkable figures there. I want to talk about some of the speeches, specifically President Xi Jinping and President Joe Biden. They'll both be addressing the group on Tuesday. It will be Biden's first speech before the UNGA as U.S. president. The two countries have been urged to work together. Do you expect positive overtures in that tone from either one of them?
It would be nice to see positive overtures. Whether that will be the case, I wonder, because in the recent past, the relationship between China and the United States has been escalating in a negative way. While Xi Jinping and Biden have talked on the phone recently, the AUKUS deal, of course, has annoyed the Chinese. It has annoyed many European countries like the French. So that is not a particularly good basis for cooperation and moving towards each other. But let's hope that the spirit of the General Assembly of the United Nations will do its bit, and that both Biden and Xi Jinping will actually see the need to cooperate. And of course, there are issues beyond geopolitics, like climate and like the pandemic, where both countries have a deep interest to cooperate with each other and know that, like the climate crisis, they need to cooperate, otherwise it really is too late. And that is what UN Secretary General Guterres has recently said. He talked about an existential crisis, that really any week, any month, any year counts. So we don't have time to leave it for another 5 or 10 years. And I'm sure both Joe Biden and Xi Jinping are fully aware of that.
The UN was born in the aftermath of World War II. The group has faced criticism for failing to prevent some of the world's worst atrocities even in recent years. Is this still the right forum, the right body to deal with the world's current challenges?
Well, one can imagine a better forum where people work together in a more constructive way, but we do not have a good alternative. There is, of course, the G20, there's the G7, there are other multilateral fora, but these are attended, as I said, by relatively few countries, usually the more powerful countries in the world. To give a voice to the smaller countries, to the less rich countries, to the poorer countries in the world, the General Assembly is still important because many countries do not have access to Joe Biden or to Xi Jinping or other world leaders apart from in the General Assembly. And I think for them in particular, it's important. I don't think it's particularly important for the United States or other world powers like China and maybe the European Union and India, because they meet each other anyway quite often. But for the smaller and poorer countries in the world, I believe the General Assembly is still very useful. And of course, it does have some successes. It's not like only a talking shop. People do get together often in the corridors, often over a coffee, to agree on common initiatives. Not least, they agree on peace-resolving issues, because there are many civil wars in the world. And where else would you like to talk about these issues if not at the General Assembly? One can imagine that it could be a better organization, that it could be more efficiently run, that the leaders of the world get their act together much better than they actually do. But the General Assembly that's what we have, and I think we have to work with it.
Professor Klaus Larres from UNC Chapel Hill, thank you for joining us.